For this next item, we will focus attention on a topic that has been highlighted in many Nordic countries, not least in Sweden. It's about the classroom climate and how it affects pupils' learning. If you remember from Jaakko's presentation, Pisa has an index on classroom climate and it has been calculated based on pupils' responses on how common it is with different moments of disruption during a lesson. The Pisa study revealed that there's a concerning lack of study order in some Nordic classrooms and that digital devices plays a role. In comparison with other Nordic countries, Sweden have the worst classroom climate and Finland is not that good either, unfortunately, whilst Denmark has one of the best. So the classroom climate in mathematics lessons in Sweden is even worse, actually, than the OECD average. And both Andreas Schleicher and also Jaakko Ikeda said that many students get distracted from their digital device and some also anxious when they don't have the digital device near. So with this in mind, we'll begin this session with listening to two academics who will highlight the connection between classroom climate and results. And we will also keep our Nordic friends here, representatives close, so we will ask you come up on stage later on. But first, I will welcome Mari-Pauliina Vainikainen up again. You've seen her before. This is her. Warm applause. And Mari-Pauliina, you're a professor, as I understand, leader of Research Center for Education, Assessment and Learning in Tampere University. And one of your areas of expertise is assessment of education and learning.
Yeah.
And you're also Vice Pisa National Coordinator.
Well, I used to be in the 22 round, but now I passed that task over to younger colleagues.
That's lovely. Please.
Yeah,
there
thank
you are. Take the floor.
Okay, I'm going to start with a quite short theoretical perspective on actually not directly on classroom climate. I'm going to talk more about school and class composition and about the factors that actually influence how the classes are formed. And because we know that actually classroom composition is a factor that is then visible in performance as well. So if we look at the performance differences or classroom climate differences, we can connect it to the classroom composition to some extent as well. So I will start by showing this was actually almost the same figure in Miako's presentation. Just to remind you about that actually the between school differences in the Nordic countries, they are quite small. But we see that there is actually quite high variation of performance inside the school. And as Miako explained it this morning, it means that we have both low-performing and high-performing students in the same schools. But what PISA doesn't tell us about this is that actually, since we don't have class-based sample in PISA, we actually don't see, based on PISA results, if those differences that we saw in the first figure there, if they are only at the student level or if there is systematic differences between classes as well. And to say something about that, we actually need other studies to complement the picture. And I have some friends at the Göteborg University who actually were the first ones to report this in the scientific article in 2014 about that in TIMSS and PEARLS, where the sampling is at the class level. They actually reported that it was surprisingly high in Finland. So the systematic differences between classes are very high in Finland in comparison to many other countries. And we have been doing quite a lot of research on our national data to understand where this is coming from. And this is some theoretical perspectives that I'm going to introduce here now. They are actually coming from these national studies that we have. So basically what I'm telling you now is based on quite a few different studies. We've had these learning to learn assessments going on in Finland since 1996. And I joined the team in 2000. So we've been doing different types of studies, longitudinal ones, national ones, municipal ones, so awfully lot of data we have from there. We also had a longitudinal study on the digitalization of education a couple of years ago, so I'm going to use that as well, and then some cross-sectional studies at the national level as well. And then I have to advertise a little bit because we are starting just now. We are starting a new project, 4 years, funded by the European Union, together with colleagues from Göteborg and Oslo, and then several different partners in Finland, and then from Germany and Hungary, and we are trying to understand much more what is behind the inequalities of education, how they develop. So we are going to utilize both our longitudinal data and other longitudinal data there as well. So if we have a look at the differences between classes, so what we see based on our old data, we actually see that the classes in Finland are different in terms of performance, in terms of motivation, classroom climate. So whatever basically you measure, you can see that there are differences between classes. So basically in the same school, at least when it comes to bigger cities, there are different types of classes in the same schools. And we can see that this is actually quite strongly related to the educational policy at the local level. So what type of political decisions they have made, both at the school level, but especially at the municipal level. I know that the Nordic countries have quite similar systems, that the municipalities have a lot of power in deciding how the education is organized. And this is the case in Finland as well. And we can see that this is actually one of the factors behind the differences that we see. So what we see is that in Finland, the classes are not formed randomly. So there is some kind of a purposeful sorting of students into different teaching groups, and it's not just that they are randomly allocated to whatever group, but there are some, and the schools have very different policies related to that. And I have two big reasons for what we have studied in our group. And these are actually two PhDs that have been completed in our group. So Satu Koivuhovi was studying the formation of the groups from the perspective of emphasized teaching, which means that the classes have different types of profiles, and then they may have some entrance test to, for example, so they have a math class or science class, and then you have to take a test to show that you are good in that subject, and then those kids are grouped together in the school. Another thing, and what I mentioned already a little bit, another thing that is happening a lot in the Finnish schools, and I told that now the law is changing and maybe there are some limitations. It's related to the fact that my colleague Ninja Hienonen, who is currently the vice MPM, I told that I passed it over to a little bit younger colleague, so Ninja Hienonen is actually one who took over the task of the Pisa vice MPM after me. So she was studying the placement of students with support needs in the classes. And she actually figured out that the organization of education and the support in inclusive settings is beneficial for all the students until some point. But then if the proportion of the students with different types of challenges in a classroom becomes very high, then it's not helping anyone. It's not helping the other students, and it's not helping the students with support needs. And this is very much in line with earlier research on classroom competition as well. That lower performers benefit from higher performing classmates. So this is basically what it's telling about. And what is a third point here? That when schools are applying different types of policies to form the teaching groups, if they are picking out the best students and placing them in a separate group, like what is the case in these profiled classes, the emphasized teaching, then it means that the regular classes are no longer regular. Then they consist of students who are left after the best students have been taken out of there. And this is actually a big problem. In Finland, this happens at the school level. In some other countries, it happens at in Finland it happens at the class level, but in some other countries it happens at the school level. But basically it's the same phenomenon. So if you take the best students, put them somewhere else, who is left in these other schools or classes, the concentration of different type of challenges is higher. There are often more students with lower socioeconomic status. There are often more immigrant students in these classes or schools. And all this is something that actually the schools and the municipalities in the Nordic countries, they can have actually quite a lot to say about that. So they can have different types of policies. So what they are allowing and what they are doing at the school level. So I'm just going to give you I'm going to run through a figure. This is a theoretical model that we've been developing together with my colleagues for a long time. And as soon as I start drawing the circles, you will see that if you have read your Bronfenbrenner, you see that his theory is in the background there. But we've been developing it further in this context and placed some of our research findings there. That of course, when we are looking at the classroom, so who are there? We have individuals. They have their own background. They have their own abilities, personal values, goals, whatever. So we have to look at the individual level as well. But then there are actually quite a lot of things. So when we are looking at the learning situation or what is happening in the classroom, so the kids, they bring some things from other parts of their lives. So what is happening in their family, what is happening in the peer groups, so all those things influence. But then there are, on the right side, there are more things that can actually be influenced at the school level or at the classroom level. So we will have to have a look at quite many different types of factors there how does the classroom climate become what it is? So there are very many things there at the class level as well. But what is now more interesting from the perspective of this theoretical model that I'm quickly presenting you is that there are actually quite many things that are not happening in the classroom. But still, they are influencing the performance, they are influencing the classroom climate. So if you take the next circle there, of course, there are things that are not directly related to the schools. But then at the school level, we have schools with very different operating culture. So what is the school culture, how it influences, how the leadership, I think that we are going to learn more about that in the next presentation, what kind of values the teacher have, how they interact with each other. So it's not necessarily happening in that particular learning situation in that classroom, but it influences how the teaching moments become in that school. We have to go further away in the Finnish context, and I would claim that in quite many other Nordic countries it is the case as well. I already told that quite many things happen actually at the local level, so local policy level. Like in Finland, for example, the municipalities, they have a lot of power in deciding what kind of possibilities the schools have in forming these students group. We have cities. 2 examples. We've had a research project in collaboration with many biggest cities in Finland, and we've also had the extremes. So one big city that has a really kind of selective school policy in that sense that they offer a lot of emphasis teaching. They even offer the possibility for school choice if they choose some subjects. And we see that the differences between schools are quite large and the differences between classrooms are huge in that city. Then we have another city exactly at the same size. So none of these are Helsinki. I'm not talking about them, but it's on a little bit smaller cities than Helsinki. The next one, they are really strict in that all schools should be similar. And when we look at the results, we look at, for example, the performance in the national assessment studies, the schools are really similar, even though there are some slight socioeconomic differences between the residential areas of the cities, and they are reflected on the results. But you can see that the results are much, much more similar to each other compared to the results in that other city, which really allow a lot of selection there. So this is something that can be directly done at the municipal level. But then, of course, it's not only depending on schools. So because, for example, this segregation of residential area is a big issue. It's a big issue in some of the Finnish cities as well. So if the schools is located on a residential area that is designed in a way that is not optimal for running a school there, then of course it's more challenging there compared to other places. And then, of course, we come to the national level, so there are a lot of things that can be also directed at the national level, even in this type of, so for example, in the Nordic countries, we have this high emphasis on educational equality. We still have it in Finland. I believe that we still have it in all these other countries that are present today. We have this ideology of inclusive education, that type of things. Of course, they influence how even the classrooms are formed. And then we can go all the way to the global discussions as well. So we can go to this type of context we are here, and even much larger context. So this was just a short introduction about my perspective on classroom climate, and basically kind of trying to tie up some of the things I already said in the first presentation about that there are actually so awfully many different things that influence both learning outcomes, motivation, all these things, that if we really want to understand where possible changes come from, we actually have to look at, those were just examples of my pictures. There are so many more things that I could have placed on the figure, which I didn't do because there was no space. But it's actually a very complex phenomenon that we're studying here, and that's why we don't have any simple answers. Yeah, and that's just another piece of advertisement. We just have a new book published, and I wrote about these things there. So if you're interested in reading about this, so it's written there. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I will hold the questions. Is there anyone in the audience that has a question to Mari-Pauliina right now on this presentation? Otherwise, there will be possibilities. No. Okay, we go. Thank you so much for now. You will come back. And now, a warm applause, of course. And now I will invite Marcus Samuelsson, who will tell us more about the importance of leadership in the classroom. And you're a senior professor, associate professor in the Division of Education, Teaching and Learning Department of Behavioral Science and Learning in Linköping University. And I can see that also on your T-shirt. That's great. So I didn't have to look in my script. And your research is mainly about teacher leadership in the classroom. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Perfect. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
And here is this. So you will...
I'll try to use that one as well.
That's good.
Thank you very much. And I heard, and I've heard several times, you're speaking about classroom management or classroom leadership, teacher quality, and I will look into that as a way to address other questions, because I think teacher quality is very important. And I will speak about teacher support for students' engagement, because different sorts of supports from teachers actually influence students' engagement, and if the students are engaged or motivated, they seem to learn more. The research say that. So let's start with a quote. And for us Swedes, we know about Peter Dalle. He's a Swedish comedian, author, and a director. And he says, I believe one can get quite far with a cheerful disposition and a bit of organization and structure. And he says that about actually about the theater, actually about directing at the theater. But this is quite important, because lots of my teacher students, they believe that this is enough for them as teachers. And I say, this is a good start. Being friendly, sensitive, warm, and so that's a good start. Have a bit of organization, that's a good start. But there is one missing piece. And the missing piece is the thing that we can see in some classroom where some children learn a lot more than in other classrooms because their teachers don't provide them with the missing piece. And I will come back to that missing piece. So, I will talk about an American theory. It's called teaching through interaction. It's one of those theories focusing on effective teaching. And perhaps you don't know, but we do not talk that much about effective teaching in Sweden. We know lots about it, but in the Swedish teacher education, we do not talk about it enough, I would say, and colleagues agree with me. And a teacher need to provide emotional support, classroom organization, and instructional support, or learning support, in order to have engaged students. So, if the teacher provides these things, the students' engagement will raise and the students will learn more. Now I will look into each one of those three domains, trying to show some examples of what do the American theory say that they mean. Perhaps, if I have time, I will give some example of effective teachers that I have actually met, spending some year with them. So, emotional support. Here we can see about emotional support. It's positive climate, it's sensitivity, and it's regard for students' perspective. And you don't seem shocked. You don't seem, whoa, that was something. No, because we know about this. Positive climate, I will come back to that, and teacher sensitivity. It's about showing your students that you actually like that they are in the classroom, rather than not in the classroom, that they are at the school rather than not in the school. But there are lots of teachers actually forgetting this for some reasons. And regard for students' perspective, of course, mean that you have to give some sort of influence. You have to give your students possibilities to express their things. What do they think? What do they like? And so on. And then positive climate. What is that? Here it is divided between relationship, positive effect, positive communication, and respect. And lots of the best teachers that I follow, I've been following them for a year, they are very, very good at this thing. They show respect, they model respect to their students, and by doing so, they are telling their students how to behave in a classroom. Not because they don't think they know that, but to ensure that they know what I mean about that. They also do lots of positive communication. All the times, walking around in a classroom, oh, that's good. I see that you work, it's very good. Oh, you solved that problem as well. They never miss an opportunity to give their students a positive comment. And when looking at those that are not that good yet, because I believe that most teachers can do better, they seem to forget that part as well. They're also very good at this positive effect. They show the students that they are positive about the way they behave, and they smile, and they laugh. They meet their children in the door, showing them, signaling to them that I like that you are here, not always how you behave, but I like that you are here, because if you are here, I can have some influence on you and on your learning. So positive, this was the first one. Lots of teachers in Sweden, they are very good at this. They are very good at emotional support. We don't have to train them on that because they have learned that still. They have learned that and they are very, very good at that. And the next part then is classroom organization. And it's divided behavioral management, productivity, and negative climate. And here we have to say that negative climate, we should have as little negative climate as we can. We don't want teachers showing negative feelings. We don't want them to scold or shout or send children out of the classroom. So we want as little of that as possible. Productivity. It's about actually, in different way, having the students, the children working with the things that I've prepared for the lesson. And then behavioral management, it's not just about disciplining the students. It's about different strategies to bring the children back to the work, back to the content, back to the things that I planned to. So just scolding, just sitting here or looking at the children, that's one way, but always bring them back to the things that they actually work with. So if I said that the first one, most teachers in Sweden, they are good at emotional support. Many teachers in Sweden, they are actually quite good at organizing their classroom. So 2 out of 2 so far, one could say. But then we have the last thing. We have the last domain, and it's called instructional support. And here I would say, according to my interpretation, that this is the lacking piece. Few teachers in Sweden are good at instructional support. And that is why the Pisa result in Sweden is low, and other sources of testing in Sweden also decrease over time, and I would say it's because of this. So this is about instructional learning formats, content understanding, analysis and inquiry, quality feedback, and instructional dialogue. So, we have to have as much interaction as possible between the teacher, the one who has planned and organized the lessons, and the students. And we know from investigations that the more the teacher talk, the less students are engaged. And this is very interesting because I work a lot with social science teachers, and they are very good at storytelling. They are very, very good. But even so, I visited one in Malmö, south of Sweden, a couple of weeks ago. He told me I will tell a story about to the children, and I hope that they will listen. It's very important. It's about the social democrats in Sweden and the development over 50 years and so on. I will look on the good side and the bad side. And it sounded very nice for me as an academic. But I saw after 15 minutes that some of the children shifted from listening to the very enthusiastic, animative teacher, flipping up their laptops, looking at some newspaper, looking at some sport results, and so on, because they had listened for too long time. And then I talked to the teacher afterwards, and he said, oh no. I tried to involve them after 10, 12 minutes by asking them questions and so on. Even so, they did not listen. Content understanding is, of course, that we have to make sure in different ways that our students learn more during the lesson than they did before. And we have to connect the things we work with in the lesson with the things that did last week or the big thing we're working with. We have also to ask them questions, to invite them. And I was very glad to sit here and listen about the think aloud. How can we understand the Pisa results? Because I thought it was to think aloud. Well, I interpret it could be like that. And the children in the classroom are also needed to be invited to think aloud in different ways. And lots of very good teachers, they organize the classroom with a mode, for example, a group work. Here's a small assignment. Talk about this in a group. Provide me an alternative way to understand it. And then they walk around and listen to the children. And then they say, well, I've listened to 5 different suggestions. It's very interesting. The first group said, and then the teacher rephrases what the children said. And then he also says, well, is that good or not? Is that generalized? Could one think about that? And then after listening to 5 groups, after giving them comments, he concludes by saying, now you're probably very, very interesting about my solution to the problem. And that's a very simple way of actually making the students working with an analyze and inquiry. Quality feedback is, of course, what it's said about, but it's not just about formative or summative feedback. It's also about the things happening during the lessons. Walking around, as I said before, giving small comments, saying, I can see that you struggle, but also say, I can see that you have solved this. Oh, I can hear that you are thinking. Can you hear that yourself? Can you feel that you've learned things? And the last one, instructional dialogue. Make the students, the children involved in the dialogue, shift between different modes. So this is the thing that I think, as a teacher educator, that we need to work more with during teacher education. Because lots of teachers, youngsters who come to us, they know quite a lot about emotional support. Even when they come to we have to train them, of course. They know quite a lot about classroom organization, but they know less about this. And we know lots about this from research about effective teaching, so we have to come back to that, I think. So in order to do that, we can perhaps provide every student with a teacher that can stand in front of them and signal, I'm here to make sure that every one of you learn as much as you want. And I'm also here to ensure that you will feel safe and secure. But not all children are having teachers as this one. And this is a problem, because in some schools, in many schools in Sweden, We have teachers like this, but that teacher is left alone. That teacher is not involved in working with the colleagues. She or he is not involved in visiting, observing other teachers, providing them research-based advice about how to do differently. And it must not be a teacher. It can as well be a school leader, of course, providing classroom observation. Because this system, this theory, teaching through interaction, is a structural observational system where you are supposed to go out to look in the classroom what the teacher actually do, and then providing them advice on how to do differently, but also saying something about, this is good, continue with this. This is also good, continue with this. And then I will come back after a while and see what is happening. And we know from research that things happening between two observations. So that was perhaps a little bit fast, but yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have a question. Why do not all teachers have this? Or can you see in which countries, maybe if you know from colleagues, which countries you see that actually have these kind of teachers? I mean, I understand at least we have these kind of teachers, but not everyone is.
Mm-hmm. Well, going on international conferences, visiting other countries, I always ask them the question, how about your teachers? Are they good? And then I present the theory, and we speak about effective teaching, and we agree. And then I say, are you good at this one, at this part? None so far has said, yeah, we are good at this. But I'm going to Japan in September, October, and hopefully I will meet some colleagues there, and they will say, of course we're good at that. Well, we know from research that Singapore, for example, they train very, very much and very effective their teacher students on things like this. And they use specific books that the teacher students then are supposed to use in the school. They use them in the teacher education, and then learn them type lessons that they are supposed to start to lesson, and then they can do different lessons, so that they work in a different way.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Is there any question from the audience before we ask our representatives up? No? Okay, let's come on, all the Nordic countries and Estonia as well. We will just have you all on stage. And at the same time, when you're coming up, I will ask you another question, Marcus,
okay,
if you're all right with that. You talk also about the positive climate.
Yes.
And positive climate with the interactions, teachers and students coming together, laughing, having a blast, could also be seen as disturbance for other students. How do you see that? As some student might think it's disturbance.
Yeah, I can see that one could perhaps see that as disturbance, but I would say, according to my and others' studies about effective teaching, effective teachers, that they have a good way of balancing that. They can say, well, let's take a brain break, and then they will start to do some moves, some dance, and they say, that was the brain break. Back to the things. So they have a way to manage their classroom, so there will never be a feeling, a sense of disturbance. But other teachers, they do not have that skill yet.
Yet, I like that word.
Yeah.
It's the growth mindset, isn't it? Welcome back on stage. Thank you so much for coming again. Marcus talked about the importance of teacher leadership, as you've seen, and how they act in class. In your countries, do you see any of these kind of evaluations being made? I know Finland, for example, Mari-Pauliina, you told us in the last test session that you are not assessing or evaluating teachers in that way. Is that something you discuss in your countries? Know if you're doing something that has... This is just, I'm just trying. I know that this is a difficult question. Or is there anything else concerning the disturbance in class you would like to react to? Yes, please, Hjalte.
I mean, in Denmark, we don't have any, let's say, official certification of teachers other than you have to have a certain education, right? I mean, there isn't a test that you have to go and pass, like, for instance, there is to become a medical doctor. And we don't test our teachers with an interval to see whether they're fit for teaching. But obviously, that doesn't mean that there aren't any quality assurance mechanisms in place. I mean, in Denmark, local governments are responsible for running schools. And many local governments have, let's say, instructors or consultants that will go out into schools and talk about practice or do internal professional development with teachers. And I'm not involved with any of that, but as I understand it, I mean, the general theory of high quality teaching presented here now is also what's found in how many local governments view good teaching and thus work for, but without it being evaluated at a national level. But I also think, it would be like these kind of things need to be sort of embedded practices in local institutions. So it would, I wouldn't say counterproductive, but I'm not sure what the added value would be for us as a national agency of education and quality to go out and make, let's say, a test or a survey or whatever that would really go on an individual level to see, are Danish teachers good enough? Because even if we got the answer that they weren't good enough, how would that help us actually to improve them? Because then it would just be a very sterile debate. So I think it's important that these kind of things are properly, I mean, we can probably provide some knowledge, and we have websites that have sort of research notes on stuff like that, or inspirational material for teaching, and I mean that might do some good, but it needs to be something that happens, I think, much closer to school than the national government.
Thank you. Yes, please, Maja.
Thanks. In Estonia, we have our Estonian schools actually enjoy the very high level autonomy, and every school's principal and the team, the leader team, they decide the rules how to assess, and usually they don't assess. But I would like to emphasize some facts about the Estonian weaknesses. Some of them is teacher support, because by this indicator we are lower than OECD average. And for instance, there was one indicator about the relationship between the teachers and students, and I guess it is a first was positions. If I look at the Estonian school climate indicators, so only 5 countries, I remember, Poland, Slovakia, Cyprus, someone, and Mongolia had lower results as we had. So this means that in this area is totally big challenge for us. And if we look for the way how to improve our education, so we have to focus on the school climate.
Thank you very much. Maybe, I mean, the question that Hjalte also asked, what can we do? Is it possible for an agency in a country to go out and give advice, to evaluate? I mean, I guess you have your view on that.
Yeah,
yes.
I have. Perhaps the agency, yes or no. I think perhaps the agency could be a player, could do some good, because we know that there are school leaders, there are teachers that actually address the problem and say, we need to find new ways to do differently, because we can see that the children, they don't learn in school, and we are not comfortable with that. And they sometimes invite companies and entrepreneurs to come and visit, observe the teaching. Some of those entrepreneurs, they are good. They have good protocols, and others don't. So perhaps if someone, I'm being a little bit optimistic here, if someone could do, due to the research, what we know actually works, conduct a protocol, train some observers, providing teachers, school leaders, opportunity for them to come and visit the classroom. We can see from several studies, in some in Sweden, some in Norway, some in Finland, and lots in the US, for example, that as few as 2 visits in the classroom actually makes a difference to what a teacher does and what the students learn.
Interesting. Yes, Maria.
I just wanted to say that after the long declining results in Sweden in all the international studies, we actually had from the government a big emphasis on professional development for teachers. So we don't evaluate the competences of teachers, but we have had many professional development programs, math boosts and reading boosts, and that's still going on. From the national agency, working together with the universities, trying to help or provide competence for teachers in need. So I think that's one way to do it. We don't have any evaluation of the teachers' skills more than we have the inspectorate and the certificate. But I just wanted to say that we try to give them support.
Thank you. Mari-Pauliina.
Yeah, so I'm coming from a context where we have very little system level evaluation of anything. So also our student assessment is like this national assessments are very different from the other countries. But as I said already, that we don't have that type of measurements for the teachers. But I think that what has changed during the last 20 years, about 20 years ago, I was working for a while as a school psychologist, and I remember at those times we are still having these more old-fashioned teachers who did their job in their own classrooms with the door closed, and they didn't want to let anybody else to get in there. But I think those times are gone now. So I think that we have this kind of natural way of assessing and improving that happens, in the everyday school life, so that the teachers are collaborating. I think that we were talking about it already before the break, that co-teaching, teacher collaboration. So in that type of way of teaching, it happens there. In the everyday school life, so that people get feedback from each other, they develop working methods together, and in an ideal context, so we don't need anything else, this is enough. But then, of course, the leadership is important as well. And now I remember one principal who is already retired. He was leading a school with more than 500 students at that time, I think, and he knew every single child by name. He came to the school in the morning, he was greeting the children, then he went to the classrooms, talked with the teachers and so on. And I think it's this type of things that if we manage to create a school like that, like they were having, and this was already 20 years ago, then we don't need to have any external control mechanisms to check that if they are doing good work. But I don't want us to go back to that time that you can just, close your door and do your job and not collaborating with each other. So I think those days are gone.
Thank you. And I'm just a short.
Yes, a short.
Just a short.
Don't forget what happened in London 2010. That was short. No, they had huge problems in London back in 2010. They said that the problems is that we have some teachers that are not good enough. They struggle. We have to have them in school. We have to support them. We have some teachers that are good and some teachers that are excellent. And then they started to observe every teacher and gave them advice. They didn't assess them. They observed them and they gave them advice, and they shifted the things happening in London by doing so and by actually giving teachers what they needed. So remember, London 2010.
Thank you. Now we focused on teachers, we focused also on groups. But for disturbance, of course, disruptions in class also has to do with other things, not only that. And how have the discussions in your country concerning the results, seeing Finland, Sweden being bad in this way, but Denmark stable, not a big problem of disturbance? And what about the other countries? I don't know if you want to say something, Frederick. Thank you.
Yeah, so we had a big debate about disturbance in classrooms after Pisa 2000. Then that was one of the main results. Norway was one of the countries where students reported a lot of disturbance and noise in classrooms. And then I think in 2012, 2015, the results, those reports improved. And and this round, it was quite similar to previous years. So in our report and also in the debate, that didn't get a lot of attention. Maybe with the exception of, again, the debate about digitalization, because we had these two items about being distracted by digital devices. So it was not so much about disturbance in general, but more about being distracted by digital devices.
Thank you. Yes, Mari-Pauliina.
Now the mic is working. Yeah, I just want to say about that the disturbances in classes in Pisa 22, the Finnish results were not good. But we have to remember that they were worse in 2012. So we actually improved compared to 2012. And this means that this is definitely not a factor that is explaining the decline of the math results, because it's actually the development is the other direction.
And I don't know, Iceland, is there any comments on this?
This question on the classroom disturbance was not, no, that was not very evident in the discussion after the PISA results. But I wanted to comment a bit on the, well, as many other things, I would like to comment a bit on the classroom environment as well, since in Iceland, as in other countries, we don't focus a lot on the teacher's performance as a government structure. But one of the things, since we are discussing and we are talking about what could be done and what are the speculations around PISA results, etc., if you're doing that, then we decided to ensure that most stakeholders were at the table, and meaning the municipalities and the teachers themselves and the unions, etc., to have them with us when focusing on how do we go forward. And one of the main aspects that the state found out in this cooperation, and what is one of the main focuses, is the professional development of teachers. So there was a lot of resources put into that as a part of the Education 2030, which is a government education policy which was adopted in 2001. So that was one of the key factors that we could actually provide here and now. So that is being done, but apart from that, there aren't that much information on teachers' performance, since we put a lot of trust in teachers and schools.
Thank you. No, it's always difficult for the explanations why the disturbance has risen. But as we were looking at the last session, we were talking about skills, where the skills were lowered because of, and we had a lot of factors. We were talking about teacher support, digital device, and so on. And concerning disturbance, there are also a lot of different, I mean, here we can't talk about the pandemic because the pandemic has nothing to do with disturbance, but digital device is maybe also a factor in this. Children's motivation, change in society. Hjalte? Reflections?
Yeah, just at least in the Danish debate, the pandemic has actually been brought up as a cause for disturbance in classes.
In what way?
People have argued that there were a couple of generations there that weren't socialized the same way as other kids were. I mean, that you were homeschooled, and our kindergartens were closed for a while, and people were told not to have play dates, and in sort of for a large part of 2020 and the first half of 21. So I mean, there are even there, we have the pandemic as a possible explanation. Sort of long-term absenteeism, like children not coming to school, which isn't exactly disturbance, but it's also sort of part of the broader social context of schooling that matters a lot, has changed a lot. I mean, and the pandemic is a very good hypothesis for why some children find it hard to return to school and find it hard to tolerate being in that environment. And of course, these things also interact with screen use, right? Because the same arguments that children aren't socialized due to the pandemic are made that children aren't socialized because they don't meet in, as they say, real life because they're on screen. Of course, that's probably also adults not understanding that the life on the screen is very real life for kids nowadays. But I mean, there are many tangled facts. I think it's even a harder question actually than decreasing resolve to sort of get a hold of the different factors contributing to it. And so just also to clarify, we have a large debate on disturbance and in classes in Denmark also. It's just that confusingly, the Pisa data didn't show it very much, but we have other data sources showing it. And we have sort of like teacher experiential knowledge saying that classrooms becoming more diverse and thus harder to manage.
Any other? Yes, Maya, please.
Just I would like to point out using the digital devices is not in Estonian case. I mean, it's not the problem in school level. This is problem or outside school, and we have, for instance, 56 hours per week. Students use digital devices, mainly mobile phone, and approximately 37 hours for the entertainment reason or purpose. And the question is, from by my perspective, is that we lose the time for resting, reading, sporting, but our brain needs a balance between the different kind of activities. And we actually know that students, if they two and a half day per week just focused on the mobile phone, they damage own brains, they damage own health, and they don't see the world so widely, but how we can actually do it.
It's just to talk about the same thing you say. The children may be changing, and that's the reason. Is that, as I understand, you say that the children are changing, so they need something else in the classroom in order not to disturb. Maybe sometimes in some computer games, it's about 16 seconds, and then something happens, and things are happening all the time. Is that something that is in the debate in your countries, or that has been debated in that actually the reason for the disturbance is maybe not that the children disturb, it's more they need something else? A very philosophical question, maybe. Not so much related to Pisa. Do we have a question from the audience? We have a few minutes for a last question, if there is. Yes, Marlene. Just a second, and we will give you a microphone. Soon.
Yes, hello, Malene from the Nordic Council of Ministers. And my question is perhaps a little bit related to the one that you just posed, Eva, because I'm thinking about this thing about attention span. This is also sometimes something we talk about in relation to learning, the ability to actually focus on one thing for a longer period of time. And this is also a prerequisite to be able to learn. And we also just heard that teachers, they need to talk less and involve students more. But I guess this is also related to the fact that students maybe find it hard to stay attentive towards teaching for a longer period of time. So I don't know if this is something that is also reflected in the national conversations about these issues. But it's at least something that has been brought to my attention, that it's something that is a challenge for young people today.
Thank you. Is this something you think about while teaching teachers? Or if someone else as well? Do you want to answer first, or should I give the word?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mari-Pauliina and then Hjalte.
No, I would just say that when we have been teaching teachers, I'm working also with the teacher education, and then we've been always teaching them to take into account the development level of the children. Like, this considering their attention span is something that we've been traditionally talking about related to their age. So, of course, when you're teaching young children, then you cannot require them to concentrate more on that in a short periods of time. But it's actually quite interesting. So this is not an answer to your question, actually. It's just some thinking aloud that this is actually a very interesting point of view, that maybe this is changing now. So this is not only related to the age or the stage of development of the children anymore, but actually you should consider those practices that we've been teaching earlier in relation to the developmental stage, but we should also think about it from this perspective, that maybe our young people are changing and the world is changing, and we have to take that into account as well when training teachers.
Thank you. Hjalte.
I mean, most definitely the answer to the question would be yes. It's something reflected in the debate. But I think there's also, one could claim, an alarmist side to this, like that kids nowadays have no ability to concentrate. They need to be stimulated constantly. I would bet that 20 years ago, kids also could only listen for 15 minutes, because I think, adults can also only listen for 15 minutes. We all know this. I mean, so a lot of this, I would caution, I think, a little bit. And now I would like to bring in Oscar's caveat. This is just my personal opinion speaking, that we should not there is also a tendency to this doom and gloom, that all is wrong. The screens are to blame. It's all going downhill. And I think even if it is going downhill, it's probably, we've all talked about like complex causality. It's probably not just screens. I mean, it was always hard for kids to concentrate. When I was in school, we also looked out the window, passed along notes. So I mean, I think there's also something there. But I have actually seen some research on a sort of a beneficial side effect of reading novels is that you become better at perseverance, at concentrating for long times. So, I mean, there is an argument made by some sort of educational psychologists that a positive side effect from reading taking up a lot of time was that people learned a lot of soft skills from that the schools then didn't feel a need to teach. And the question is, so if reading novels as a media product is, I don't think it's disappearing, but becoming less prevalent, then perhaps there are some things that the school were given as a positive side effect of some other practice that they now need to teach more explicitly. So I mean that's sort of a different way of saying the same thing without thinking it about that our brains are being modified so that we can't think or concentrate anymore, which some debaters in Denmark at least seem to claim with varied level of let's say research basis, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. And I will now give the last word to Marcus.
No, you don't have to give it to me. No. But if you give it to me, I would say I started to listen to a podcast the other day. And the podcast was, among things, about multitasking. About grown-ups thinking that they can do multitasking and still have high-order thinking at the same time. We can't. Also saying that lots of grown-ups every 6th minute shifted from their work focusing on social media. So I don't think it's just about the kids. We have to start to look at ourselves. We have to find ways to model, to show, to be an example of how can we do and what should we not do. Because sometimes I think that our children learn from us, not just from each other.
True. Thank you so much. We will make that the last say. Thank you so much to all of you. And we will just have a 3-minute technical break so we can just mic our speakers. So you can mingle, say hello to your neighbor. Maybe you haven't spoken to each other today.